So I was talking to my son, and we got to reminiscing about when the Saints won the Super Bowl, and it was the year my son was born, actually. But uh, I can't believe it's almost been 17 years ago. Anywho, I got to talking to him, and because they got Tyler Shuck now, and uh, they look like they're headed in the right direction. And I said, what was amazing about that run is their defense was god awful. The Saints had like one of the worst defenses in the league. But what was really crazy about it was that they were the highest scoring defense. So it was basically this perfect storm. Because if you were back in the day, if you were paying attention to the Saints back in the day, Drew Brees, number one offense. Like when Drew Brees was at the helm, they were always number one. They were going to outscore you. You were going to have to, you had to outscore the Saints to win. But what happened was, during the Super Bowl run, is that their defense was number one in scoring also. So that when the opposing team, and I remember the Jets game held the Saints to, I think it was like 10 or 12 points. The offense held Drew Brees and the offense to like 10 or 12 points. But the defense ended up scoring like 2 touchdowns, intercepting the ball. And so they tacked on an additional like 14 points. And that's how they beat the Jets. So it was this deal where if you stopped the Saints' offense, the defense, you still had to stop the defense from scoring. And it was like that too. It really was. Even though their defense was god-awful, they couldn't stop the pass, they couldn't stop the run, but man, did they make you pay for it. They did too. Like, they were the highest scoring defense of that year. I mean, yeah, you could get 300 yards passing and 100 yards rushing on that defense, and it'd make for an interesting game. But if your defense couldn't stop Drew Brees, well, it was going to be a long day. And that's normally the run of the mill for the Saints. But that specific season, even if you did stop Drew Brees, all of a sudden, their defense came in and made you pay for that. And they would tack on. Man, it was nothing to see the defense, make a touchdown or two. Or sometimes, I think there was a couple games where they made the specific game I'm thinking of. They made 2 touchdowns and a safety. I think that's the highest scoring game they had. But they was always gonna make you pay for it. And so the gist of it is that, and I know a lot of teams modeled their offenses after Drew Brees and what the Saints did, but really what a lot of teams overlooked, what they kind of failed to see is that you had to outscore both sides of the ball. You had to stop both the offense and defense from scoring on you. And that's why the Saints ended up winning a Super Bowl that year. Because no matter what you did, you always had to stop the Saints from outscoring you, and it was almost impossible. Even I remember the Super Bowl I think they had like 5 field goals before they even made the first touchdown. And then what happens? Drew Brees throws for a couple touchdowns, and then the defense scores. You know? And so that was like 3 touchdowns back to back. And it made it look like it looked like they dominated the Colts. But if you go back and you watch, really the Colts controlled that game for about 3 quarters. Really, I mean, roughly for about 3 quarters, the Colts was pretty much in charge. And then Drew Brees and the defense just made all them quick scores, and then you look at the end of the game and you're like, the Colts never stood a chance, you know? So it was just this amazing thing. And like I said, a lot of teams wanted to model themselves after the Saints' offense. But really, even though the Saints' defense statistically was no good, they were so opportunistic. They were so good at scoring, on other teams. The Saints' defense was good at scoring on the opposing offense. There's games where the Saints' defense scored more points than the opposing offense scored. There was games like that. And so when your defense can outscore the other team's offense, you're going to win most of all your games, and you're going to end up with a championship. And so that was the secret sauce that put the Saints in the Super Bowl, because the Saints' offense was always number one. They put Drew Brees out there. They had Reggie Bush. I mean, you can just go down the list of all the different players that's been on the Saints team on that offense. With Sean Payton there and Drew Brees at the helm, they was always a number one offense. They were always top scoring offense in the league. But that defense, brother, that was the secret ingredient